I have this message from Imelda Nassar as well as Alfred Dodu seem to say that the budget review seem to have been met with some lack of enthusiasm by the general public. Is that the same feeling you get from the rank and file of not only the party but also where you're coming from? Kwadaso, for example.
Okay, so thank you, Roland. Good morning to your revered viewers, my very good friend, Bernard, and the rep from the NDC. I don't really understand what you mean by lack of enthusiasm. I don't know how you have been able to gauge the mood of the people. I don't know whether by enthusiasm you're expecting people to be jubilating, or I don't know. But I think that what the finance minister presented yesterday represents the reality on the ground. And you see, the world has been going through difficulties since 2020. These difficulties do not exclude our dear country. If what is happening in this country is an outlier situation, only Ghana, then probably we can say that something is going on, something is going wrong somewhere. But Ulan, everywhere across the globe, you see.
Where and where?
I mean, both within our sub-region, on the continent, outside the continent, the other continents. Well, you discover that generally, people are not very much happy or excited because of the difficulties in these respective economies. But so the finance minister told us the difficulties and the challenges and what we are doing within our might and our available resources to mitigate these hardships. I'm happy that in his statement, he commended the Ghanaian for their patience, for their support and their contribution towards government efforts. I think that
But would you say that the finance minister's categorical statement that what was it? We have turned around the corner.
No,
is the rightful description of where we are currently, having just gone to the IMF in May? Because the countries that you, for example, compare us to, apart from Egypt, where inflation per what the actual had been just a month or two ago is 35.7%. We seem to be the highest, apart from Sierra Leone in the sub-region. Sierra Leone has 44, we have 42%.
Yeah.
So when we're speaking, we have to speak in perspective.
You see, so turning the corner, my understanding, if you look at dictionary, means passing a critical stage and being set to improve. So
realistically, would you say have we? If not that we had debt exchanges, we postponed returns that we have to pay on various investments that ordinary Ghanaians have with us, as well as even external creditors are with us. We wouldn't have been in this position. Is that not it?
The debt restructuring is part of the solution to get us out of the woods. It's part of it.
That's a celebration.
No, I'm saying that, you see, when you find yourself in difficulties, you need solutions, okay, to get out of those difficulties. Okay, so it is an aspect of the interventions that we are rolling out based on the extended credit facility from the IMF. So now, don't also forget that between 2017 and even 2021, we were able to manage inflation so very well. We took inflation from 15.4, and in 2021, I remember that inflation was about 7.9%, and that 7.9%, I mean, single-digit inflation, we did that for about so many months, about 2 years, okay? Then, all of a sudden, last year, if you read the Economist magazine, the magazine described 2022 as a period of bad inflation across the group. It was, difficult for everybody, every country, in terms of inflation figures.
And we didn't see it coming, did we?
No, I'm saying that, you see, if you also read Food and Agriculture Organization Food Index report, it predicted in February that there was going to be food inflation, especially across.
And what were the buffers that we put in place preemptively?
You know what I mean? So I'm saying that this happened as a result of myriad of very difficult, less to control shocks, especially. You saw fuel prices, skyrocketing. Our import every month for energy products was about $400 million. We spend $1 billion every year to keep our lights on. But the point I'm making is that we were able to bring it down. And if you check, every country had inflation going up, affecting food prices. Now, turning the corner. So at the point we got to 54.1% in December last year. But he was saying that as we speak, it is now 42.1%.
And that is good news.
It's as an improvement. 42% as compared to 54.1%. Yeah.
42.
Yeah.
That is good news.
No, I'm saying that there's an improvement. If we are saying that inflation talks about the rate at which prices increase.
The percentage rate of...
Yes, 54% is not a good spectacle. 42% is also not a good spectacle. But in terms of pricing, you can get some marginal positive impact on you. Okay, so when we took over the economy, it was not like everything was rosy, because we were on an IMF extended credit facility program. We put in interventions. Okay, we were able to bring growth from 3.4%, 2016, 2017. We were able to do 8.4 averagely. We did about 7%. Primary balance, for example, we met it in deficit. 3 years on a row, we were able to produce a positive primary balance, trade surpluses. 3 years on a row, we were able to do that. If you look at the indicators, currency depreciation, we did about 8.7% within that period.
So you're writing your BEC. We should go and look at how well you performed in the primary school.
No.
That's what you're saying.
No, the point is that in life, it gets to a point that
the examiner WAEC will look at how well you performed in primary school.
I'm saying that realistically and practically in life, it gets to a point that you face setbacks. But the point is that how do you ensure that these setbacks are overcome? What are the interventions that you put in place? If you fail examination today, it doesn't mean that you are a bad student. It is how you recover. There are some people who have failed in life before, but at the end of the day, they are able to make impact. But I'm saying that in the midst of the difficulties, Ghana is not, doing badly. In the midst of as the finance minister did say yesterday, please, just indulge me. As he did say yesterday, in the midst
we did so bad to the point that we have to suspend all payment of our debt to be able to make sure that we are able to stabilize the economy. Yeah. And so it is in that midst of that stabilization where we're not paying our debts, we're telling our creditors that they should hold on, that we're celebrating. Is that not what you're saying?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Then what are you saying?
No, what I'm saying is that when you have difficulties, you need to look for solutions. So suspending your debt obligations doesn't mean that you are not going to pay them as we speak. At least he told us yesterday that our appropriation for 2023 was 227.7 billion cedis. Now we've done about 206 billion cedis.
Yes, we've cut down 20 billion. 20
billion. And that 20 billion, and all these are targeted at helping us to be able to sustain our debt, our debt portfolio. So what I would say is that difficult times demand difficult, thoughtful, and innovative interventions. And what we are doing, we are confident that with this, and do you know that?
Please end globally, for me. You call this innovation?
Let me learn.
We've gone to the IMF when there are certain restrictions. That's not innovative.
I've gone to IMF. That is fair. But the point is that
Dr. Nyako,
the interventions you put in place to get out of the woods is also very important. We are in this country. In 2014, we had to queue to buy
fuel. You're not going to 2014, please. It's okay.
What do you think?
No, but just in 3 minutes, the reality is that at the end of the day, we still have a debt overhang for which we've been struggling to be able to meet some of these terms. Over the period, since we had this budget in November, we've had coupons that are supposed to be paid to those who have bought our bonds not being able to pay. Just recently, even the last cocoa bill that was issued out in February, those who were expecting returns anytime soon within the period that they bought it this year have now had a situation where we've had restructuring. And so when we're putting the things into perspective, well, they say that we've done so well, and so there should be an applause. What do you say to that?
Roland, good morning to you. Good morning to my brothers. The MPP, led by the finance minister, as the finance minister in charge of our monies, all of them have performed poorly. In fact, our problems have been exacerbated, our woes aggravated, and our suffering continues unabated. And I'll tell you why. This is the same finance minister last year went to Parliament with his own budget and put together some targets set by himself, not set by the NDC, not set by Ghanaians. He, based on the figures he has and based on the programs he has gotten us into, drew his own budget and put together his own targets. Just to tell us that at the time he was going to do GDP growth of 2.8%, and you come back and revise it downwards, telling us that you're going to do 1.5%. And I heard Prof tell us that it has to do with the economic conditions, global economic conditions, and every country or most countries within the sub-region. And that is untrue. That is never true. Now, if you want us to compare the GDPs, Ivory Coast is doing the same IMF program as we are doing. But if you read about Ivory Coast, they are currently doing 6.2% of GDP growth. Nigeria is doing 3.2% of GDP growth. Mauritius is doing 4.6%. Kenya is doing 5.3%. Rwanda is doing 6.2%. Ethiopia is doing 6.1%. So how then can you come and tell us that reducing the GDP growth, your own target of 2.8%, 1.5% is as a result of global economic shocks and almost all the countries within the sub-region are suffering? No, it just has to do with your incompetence, your recklessness, and your inability to even meet your own targets you set.
You said we should put it into perspective. That
No,
we're not
yes,
the
we
only
are putting it into perspective. You do not set your own marking scheme. When you fail the exam, you come back and review the marking scheme and you expect us to applaud you. No. That is a failed student. You don't go write a BEC exam. Once you fail, you say that, oh, why you should now review the marking scheme downwards just because you were unable to meet the marking scheme. So they have failed, they have performed abysmally. And all of that has to do with their own recklessness. Now, let's even come to some of the most important things we thought, especially in the NDC, thought they would have held on to, most especially capital expenditure and targeting the contractors within this economy. Because you see, once you spend towards that area, then it helps the economy to expand. There's money in the system. You owe contractors 15 billion Ghana cedis.
in excess, actually.
Thank you. You plan to pay 5 billion Ghana cedis this year. So far, you have done just 1.8 billion Ghana cedis. And we don't even think you can even meet the 5 billion Ghana cedi target. So how then do you expect the economy to grow? How then do you expect people to live? How then do you expect some of these companies to continue to survive? Go out there, you realize that most construction companies are dwindling. Most of them are shrinking. Most of them are closing down. Most of our external debt, the Eurobonds, most of them, you have defaulted. And that is why you would realize that most of the construction sites you see all over the country, most of them have halted. Go to the interchange around Teshinungwa, construction or works have stopped. Most of the construction sites you see all over this country have halted because you have defaulted in the payment. And that is what is accounting for that relative artificial stability of the currency. Then you come back and tell us that, oh, we've been able to sustain or been able to maintain the stability of the currency. But that in itself is very, very artificial. You do not owe people and not pay and expect that at the end of the day we would applaud you. Once you owe people, you must pay. If you are even a businessman and you owe people and you do not pay, yet you are living a lavish lifestyle, or your company is doing well, you expect us to applaud you that you owe so much, you are not paying the people you owe, yet your business is
But
doing. Your
Osman,
business cannot
they
do
decided
well.
to cut taxes. And if you make a reference to the budget in November, for which, of course, we have a review now, for example, we're not going to have new vehicles being bought. Just in case MDAs, ministry departments and agencies want to undertake some level of travel, it has to be a very important or pertinent travel. If you want to undertake conferences, etc., you do it in-house instead of going to have a rental outside, etc. So we're told those are some of the key expenditure cuts.
Roland, read that same budget. You will realize that they have increased goods and services from 4.1 billion to 4.7. So how then do you expect us to believe this story coming from the NPP? If you say you've cut some expenditure in terms of your spending, your conferences, your allowances, yet expenditure for goods and services. And what is goods and services? I mean, let's bring it down for the ordinary Ghanaian. That is the chop. Excuse my language, but that is it. That has to do with allowance, that has to do with fuel, that has to do with mobility, that has to do, for example, stationery. Example, you have the vice president going around to campaign. All of that has to do with goods and services. He goes with a long convoy from one region to another. He stops there, then he goes into a bus to create the impression.
Going around with goods and services.
No, I mean, that is part. Why don't they buy fuel?
But he said that the vice president is working as a vice president, not campaign.
He's going, campaign. Let me tell you what they do. The vice president moves from Accra to Kumasi using the same state vehicles. Then he gets to Kumasi and goes into a bus to now move within Kumasi. And they are telling us that the vice president is funding his own campaign using a bus. And we've seen him go around. So please, let us be very honest with ourselves.
That's your interpretation of how he's undertaking his campaign.
That is how he's undertaking. We all see how he's undertaking his campaign. Okay. So that is no secret. So if the finance minister comes around and tells us that they are turning the corner, or what was the phrase he used? They are turning the corner. We can only understand that they are only turning the corner within the NPP. They are turning the corner around within Cecilia Dape's house. They are turning the corner around where you have staffers having misplaced so much amount of money. This is the kind of economy we are going through. This is the kind of suffering we are going through. This is the kind of suffering we will continue to go through if they are not being honest in their spending. Yet, don't forget that the same finance minister came to Parliament or went to Parliament and told them that this time around they're going to do 0 T-bills. So far, they have done 5.5 billion of T-bills, and they plan to do 41
that's domestic borrowing.
Yes, domestic borrowing, 41 billion of T-bills. So you see,
for the rest of the year.
For the rest of the year. So you see, we have just come out of a DDP, and what took us there has to do with borrowing, excessive and reckless borrowing. And even in the process of the DDP, you continue to borrow. This is a classical example of what happened in Jamaica, where they had to go through twice or 2 types of DDP. So what happened is that it was the first tranche of the DDP and it was the second time. So if you are not careful with the kind of recklessness that is happening within the NPP and within this government, we may have to go through a double portion of DDP, the first one and the second one. Because once government doesn't continue to stop borrowing, we'll continue to suffer as a country.
But Bernard, the reality is that we're still negotiating, right? As far as the restructuring of whatever it is in relation to the domestic debt exchange. The unions are still there. We're still engaging them. We also have the pensioners also waiting for their coupons to be paid. If you look at what the announcement has been, and then the finance minister making the projections, the revision downwards, for some economists and those who tend to watch the economy, they say that it's a way to give some assurance that we're moving at a pace for which we are setting targets that we can meet easily. What's your perspective?
I greet you. I greet Osman. And let me congratulate Professor Kingsley Nyako on his rise to professorship. First time I'm hearing it on your show. And I think that is worth commending him for that achievement. Beyond that achievement, This morning, he is a flop. He has failed to adduce the challenges confronting our economy. One of the challenges, which I am disappointed in Kingsley, is that, and I'm sure you permit me when I call you by your first name,
Oh, no problems about that.
is that their side of parliament realized that the major problem confronting the people of Ghana and the economy of Ghana is the finance minister. And that an initial 8, which led to about 96, eventually turned to be the entire 137/138 majority members who all agreed that Ken Ofori-Atta is the bane of Ghana's economic difficulties. And to that extent, they all advocated that the finance minister should be removed. Today, that problem is not resolved. And you are sitting here telling us that there is a glimmer of hope when indeed there is bad news for all of us.
Turning around the corner.
How do you turn around the corner? And that's what takes me to Dr. Sarkodie. Dr. Sarkodie says that we are going to catch a flight and we are supposed to go 100 kilometers per hour in order that we meet the flight because the flight will take off. And all of a sudden, we have reduced to 40 kilometers per hour. By the time we get to the airport, the flight is gone. And so, would have just wasted fuel, would have wasted our energy and other resources, just going to get to the point that we are supposed to get, and nothing is there for us to catch up. And you tell us that this is not retrogression, and that you don't agree when people say that GDP, that was supposed to grow up to about 3%, has been reduced to 1.5%, and that that does not mean that the economy is contracting. I don't know where we have learned this economy from. The economy simply has contracted. It has shrinked. And to the extent that something that was supposed to be 3.5, 3.8, has come down to 1.5. You tell me that no, we are still growing.
2.8.
2.8, now getting to 1.5. And you tell me that, no, we are still growing. Growing to where? To 2.8? When we are expected to grow maximally at 1.5, which is not even an assured sum or rate. Then you come and tell me that we are doing well. Don't say that the economy is shrinking. That can only be in your own nomenclature, but not within the economic balance. The economy has shrunk. And it's important to make that point without any equivocations. That when we're speaking, it's important to spell out the economy has sunk and sunk badly. Look, Ken Ofori-Atta presented this budget statement amidst the hula baloo from the majority side of parliament, amidst the IMF and World Bank conditionalities. We got to a point where they said that no, we have to wait for Ken Ofori-Atta to reach a rapprochement with the IMF before presenting the budget statement. And so the 2023 budget statement contains the IMF projections, so to speak, that midway down the line, in fact, more than midway because the budget statement was presented in November, don't forget.
Yes.
More than midway down the line, you are coming to tell us that even with the IMF conditionalities included in the budget that you presented to us, you still tumbate. You could not think futuristic. You could not forecast well. So if we have a challenge with our economy, and Professor Kingsley Nyarko is sitting here, cannot point that Ken Ofori-Atta continue to be the nemesis of the Ghanaian economy, I am very disappointed. See, inflation was projected to come to 18%. Now we are expecting in excess of 31%. What does inflation mean to you? It means that you'll be buying goods and services at higher than expected prices. Does that not increase your cost of living? Taxes that were expected, the Association of Ghana Industries, the Ghana Union Traders Association, and many others were expecting in this review that taxes were going to come down so as to give them some relief so that they can do their businesses. Nothing of that nature has come. So when you have an austere fiscal regime, how do you expect businesses to progress, for that private sector to leap your economy? Who says that taxation is the purpose of taxation is solely to raise revenue?
But where we are, that's what we need. We need to increase revenue.
Increasing revenue,
and for us to do that,
it is only someone who does not
taxes.
understand the rationale behind taxation that thinks that taxation is to increase revenue. In fact, we use taxes to correct defects within the economy. So that if we are importing so much into this country, for instance, that you want to augment domestic production and to ensure that what you eat, what you consume is produced, you increase taxes and duties on the imported products so as to enable the domestic products looks cheaper for many Ghanaians to now develop a taste for it. You are not doing that. You are not doing that at all. Then you come and tell me that the purpose, look, COVID-19 rocked businesses, particularly the hospitality sector.
You still haven't recovered fully.
Yes, it rocked and broke them down. The hospitality sector, most of them, and I keep saying this, if you are running a restaurant and chop bars were asked to close down, don't go and operate. And you had bought your tomatoes to serve you for 1 month. You have bought your friend say, Nyadua, garden eggs to serve you for 1 month. And they are perishables, by the way. So when you were in lockdown for almost 3 months or more, it means that you lost those produce. You lost the material. What it means is that your capital has gone wasted. When a government responsible and indicating that they want the private sector to grow, that government should not come and do anything than to give these private sector institutions some liquidity to fly. You rather came and imposed taxes on them. Because your warped economy says that anytime you impose taxes, businesses will shrink. And when businesses are not able to expand, you think that they will be able to generate profit for you to tax. So you keep taxing on capital. And probably that is where I agree with Sarkodie. When you attack working capital in the form of electronic TV levy, when you attack working capital,
call it TV levy.
I call it TV levy, and
but that's your perception. But let me correct. Let me put some caveat here, and this one is coming from Dr. Edu Owusu Sarkodie. He says, contraction only happens when GDP growth is negative.
When you have a GDP projected at 2.8 that reduces to 1.5, how do you call it?
If GDP is pegged at 1.5,
yes,
it doesn't mean that there is contraction.
So it means that what you projected to achieve, you cannot achieve it. Then you have contracted. I mean, what is this one too?
No. So it already means that you're only reducing
what is the meaning of reducing?
The targets that you have.
What is reduction?
It could also mean that we could still have liquidity inflow within the economy.
Which liquidity are you talking about? When even the Bank of Ghana is in debt. And I keep saying that when the river is dried up, do you ask of whether the fish is alive?
But I need to put that into perspective, though. So when you say contraction,
I'm saying that when the river is dried up, the
fact that a target has been lowered doesn't mean that the economy
I'm saying
is
that the target was raised with all the conditionalities of the IMF and the World Bank in place.
Point made.
So today, if we are reducing that, it means that, look, what does that mean? When GDP is increased, you are expecting per capita income to also rise, right? Now, when the GDP is lower, it means that per capita income will be lower.
And it will affect consumer spending. But it doesn't ultimately lead to contraction.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So Dr. Lord Mensah, again, I beg your pardon, Professor Lord Mensah. I have a lot of profs here today. Professor Lord Mensah, are you on?
I'm on.
Okay.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, please. If you take a look at government PCPEC that was agreed with the IMF, you also get to find out that the whole intent, if you look at the 7-pointer pillars, restore macroeconomic stability, try to align fiscal policy, and then debt sustainability levels, pursue aggressive revenue mobilization. And that's an option that any country could take. And that's what we've also done. And then also do some level of expenditure rationalization as far as this is related. If you take a look at what the finance minister has so far posited to be what we have by way half year through the budgetary year, as said yesterday, would you say we're on track on the revenue side and then also making sure we align fiscal policy?
Yes, Roland. So before we can say we are on track, let's look at the indicators the finance minister used.
Please do.
And in appreciating the economy, to indicate that the economy is doing well. I'm looking at interest rate, reduction that he mentioned, looking at inflation, which was around 52 point something, moving towards the 40 line. And then we have exchange rate stability that we've enjoyed for some time. Clearly, you'll come to understand that these reductions are numerically significant, but they're not economically significant. Let me put it that way. And I would differentiate between the two.
Please do.
They are numerically significant in the sense that, clearly, per the levels of numbers, if you are looking at inflation, which has reduced to 40 thereabout, you will come to understand that it's still above interest rate on investment. That tells you that the real value of an investment is still negative. If you have invested and you are earning 30%, the real value of your investment is still negative 10. Looking at inflation. So the difference between inflation rate and, the interest rate, as far as they move apart, and that is why in the review, the target by the end of the year is around 30%, which by that time it will almost be a par with the interest rate, and therefore investors can have that kind of breathing space to enjoy the real value of their investment. So we're not there yet, and that is what I'm talking about. Looking at it as the economic significance of the reduction. We've not hit on it yet. Now we're looking at interest rate. Now, we know very well that the Monetary Policy Committee has been increasing, the policy rate,
yes,
which has effect on interest rate structures. And obviously, businesses are crying. Liquidity is a problem. And if you look at Bank of Ghana's report, clearly will indicate and tell you what the situation in Ghana. So for a businessman to work comfortably, for an individual to work comfortably to the banking hall, to borrow at a lower interest rate, that confidence is not there. So still, the interest rate has come down, but numerically, but it's not making that economic impact. Now let's look at exchange rate. If you take this economy, as we speak now, the demand for exchange rate is not on full scale yet. Let me put it that way. Who are those who demand, the dollar? We're talking about businesses. We're talking about individuals. We're talking about, government, okay? Now, as we speak, government demand for dollar has gone down because of the suspension of our external debt to have negotiations with our external creditors so that, we can start paying. So that means that government is not servicing its external debt. If we resume, the service of our external debt, that is when we're going to see the full scale of dollar demand in this country. Then we can determine whether the current stability that we are enjoying is a good economic, measure. So I can tell you that all the indicators that he used are very good indicators to measure economy, but then also they are numerically significant in terms of reduction, but then economically that reduction is not making, any impact. Now, if you take, the revenue, enhancement, policies that was rolled out for the IMF program, I can tell you that on the revenue side, we are doing very well. And if I go into my paper, yes, the review is a total revenue and grant for the first half of 2023 was around 53.3 billion, which which is below the target of 64.7. So the difference between the target and then the what we call it, the what we have achieved is that very small. So on that score, I can say that we're doing very well. But you cannot achieve a target on revenue and blow up your expenditure. If you look at the expenditure side, we're looking at expenditure of 68.5 billion in the first, half of the what we call it, which is going with a target of 92.9 billion. You see, and clearly, if you look into the program, right, governments never gave any signal that they are ready to reduce or ration any part of their, what we call it, so the flashy programs. There's nowhere in the document that gives any signal. But then, if you look at the entire, what we call it, target for expenditure for the year, it has been reduced to 6 billion.
6, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Professor Lord Mensah, would you say when it comes to the effort in making sure that we reduce expenditure, the key flagship programs, at least one or two, should have been looked at by way of their expenditure patterns?
That is fantastic. So one of the
because
key,
we are in a difficult period.
Yes. One of the key flagship program is the Agenda 111. You see, I went into a document and I realized that the Agenda 111 will be costing us, 16 billion per hospital, 16.88, for which the 12.88 is going for the infrastructure, and then the 4 million is for the equipment to, to stock the infrastructure to make it a hospital. So we need 11 of this. We need 111 of this. So when you multiply the 111, you come to understand that we need about almost $2 billion, to complete this program. And in the what we call it, in the review, he indicated that 83 of them are in phases of progression. And so I was asking myself, $1 billion, where are we going to get the money from? Looking at our inflows from what we call it, revenue, petroleum revenue receipt, which is in dollar terms, looking at our export, and then, also looking at the various financing sources, that the government has access to.
Okay.
We're looking at the international market. We've been priced out.
Okay.
The only place we can get dollar. We've been priced out from there. When you look at the local market, the dollar-denominated bond, which has, possibility of being restructured, nobody is interested in it anymore. Long-term government bonds, also that you can use to finance infrastructure of that sort, nobody is interested in it because of the restructuring. The investors' appetite.
Okay, just hold your horse there. Professor Nyarko wants to just ask you a question. You answer it in a minute, and then I come to him.
Yeah,
just a minute.
Lord, good morning. Okay, so
good morning,
so as an academic, I'm sure you chose your words carefully when you said that the reduction of the inflation figures from 54% to 42.5% is numerically significant, but doesn't have any impact on the company. So I want to find out from you: are you saying that it will have no economic positive impact at all, or the impact might be minimal or negligible? And again, the interest rates, as you did say, that is up a bit on the high side. And I also know that it is also used to, deal with inflation and all that. So don't you think that with your experience in finance, that 30% or so is also fighting to bring inflation down? What is your take about that?
Yeah, you see, when you are talking about numerical reductions, you can comfortably, say that the rate has come down to maybe, I'm talking about inflation now, to 40%. Reduction of about, let's say, 12, percent. Effectively, anybody who is investing has not started realizing the real value, positive real value of his investment. So obviously, economically, he's investing all right because, he prefer not to keep the money at home. The risk of keeping money at home compared to, the risk of keeping it at the bank or investing in something. Other than that, if you keep it in the house, the inflation will wipe out completely. You get a negative, 40% completely. But then if you are to invest it in a way, you still get some compensation, which, like I mentioned earlier, the negative, 10 is still not, positive enough for that investment to make economic impact on you. So if you invested to buy 10 bags of cement in the next 6 months, you will not be able to buy the 10 bags of cement because the purchasing power, of your money has gone down completely.
Okay.
And then we're looking at inflation. Now, if we're looking at interest rate has reduced completely. It has reduced, but then as you're sitting in the studio, right, Prof, can you walk to the bank comfortably? Or a business can walk to the bank and say, lend me money at what cost? Banks are charging loan rates of about 35% thereabout because they have to put in what? Margin, and then also look at the economic prospect going into the next 6 months. So once, the reductions are not triggering that economic effect, you see, that is why we will read into the economy and then say that, yes, things are coming down, but still hanging at the macro level. What about individuals who are, who have the comfortability to do their business and they are not getting the opportunity to do it?
All right.
Because of the...
Okay, Prof. Thank you very much for making this input. We'll see you on the other side later. And, Professor Lord Mensah is regular right here on the show and helps us do a lot of analysis. He's with the University of Ghana Business School. But quickly, just 2 minutes for all of you. If you take a look at this, what the revised targets are, what the perspectives are, it should give anybody, whether in the domestic market or the external market, some level of hope. What should that hope be? What can you tell somebody who is prospecting, intending to invest in Ghana, that this is what we're promising and this is what the finance minister has said will come to fruition?
Revising macroeconomic figures, trying to also revise fiscal measures is something that happens. Media budget review and others, you look at indicators and how they are performing within a certain context, and you decide whether to, revise it upwards or downwards. Roland, I would like you to get this.
You have 2 minutes, please.
The IMF last year projected that growth output globally is going to decline from 3.4% to 2.8%. That is a fact. So if Ghana decides to reduce its growth forecast from 2.8% to 1.5%, I was talking about that. Don't forget that the projection was made before we began the IMF negotiations, and we reached a staff level agreement. Okay, so reversing it will fall in line with what was agreed in the staff level agreement. So there's nothing wrong about that. For me, I'm happy that because of what we are doing, the debt restructuring, the idea is to restore confidence in the economy, macroeconomic stability, and debt sustainability. That's very, very, very important. That is why we have been able to reduce our expenditure from 227 billion cedis to 206 billion. To help us so that we will not overburden our debt portfolio. That is very significant. What I want Ghanaians to bear with us is that
your time is up.
We think about Ghanaians, and all that we are doing to inure to the collective benefit of the Ghanaian. The government appreciates the pains and the suffering that we are going through, but the government is not relenting, putting in interventions to ensure that at the end of the day, the Ghanaian benefits. So we need everybody, to come to the table for us to see how we will be able to make sure that the Ghanaian benefits.
We have to bed in share.
fantastic.
All right. So he said we have to burden schedule. I'll give you just a minute, 60 seconds. Sorry.
Roland, we are in a very hopeless situation, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Trust me, we have moved from burden sharing to burden shifting. The burden
We've
has
moved
been
from what?
Burden sharing from the NPP to burden shifting. They have shifted the burden from government to we the citizens. So I don't expect to hear them to say that the burden has been shared. So there's nothing like burden sharing. It's rather burden shifting from the government to the ordinary citizens. We are in a hopeless situation because we have reviewed and they have revised all their targets downwards. That is how hopeless the situation is. We're in a hopeless situation because government is unable to meet its targets and the citizens will continue to suffer. We're in a hopeless situation because just this year, World Bank says over 850,000 people have been moved into the poverty line. We're in a hopeless situation because they have been reckless. And I sympathize and empathize with any NPP communicator. You can see this morning, Prof has been suffering left, right, and it's very obvious. I mean, we are here. It's very obvious. He's been struggling to defend the abysmal. He's been struggling to defend the abysmal performance, the recklessness, and the incompetence of the finance minister. So this is where we are as a country.
Okay,
A very hopeless
my time is
situation.
unfortunately I can't give you.
Well, in agreeing with OPK, unless and until the finance ministry is liberated from Ken Ofori-Atta and the data bankers, we'll continue to have this mess that we have. And that is why I am surprised that when President Akufo-Addo decided to move a deputy minister who is knowledgeable in finance from the Ministry of Energy to the Ministry of Finance, I was hoping that that would have been the basis upon which Ken Ofori-Atta would have been shackled.
He's your brother, right?
Ken is doing
Well,
You're giving him.
Ken is a disaster that this nation need to vomit, and the longer Ken continues to stay, look, Ken is within the sub-region. All his other colleagues are doing GDPs higher. All his other colleagues are doing inflation far, far lower than he is doing. None of his colleagues are benefiting directly from borrowing from the international institutions. Ken is simply a calamity that has befallen this nation.
Thank you, Bernard. Let me just put some matters into perspective. And June, July, and these are the inflationary figures we have, at least in Africa. So Egypt has 35.7%. That's the latest. Kenya has 7.9% inflation. Madagascar, 12. It's a very chilling destination for many Ghanaians as well. 12.11%. Zimbabwe has 101%. Tanzania has 3.6%. Togo. For those of you who like to say Togo. I say Togo. So Togo has 6%. Togo, you just cross Aflawo, you go there. 6% inflation. Nigeria has 22.7%. That's the latest they reported in June. And we have Senegal. They're around us here. 7.5%.
Kenya.
Kenya
7.9.
7.9. And then we have Senegal, 7.5%. Uganda, 4.9%. Rwanda, the countries that we always compare ourselves with, 20.4%.
Make sure Professor is
Liberia, good morning to all my friends in Montserrado, that's in Monrovia. Liberia has 9.43%.
even Liberia.
Ghana has 42. Don't worry, you'll be fine. What on Libya has 2.5%. And then Burkina Faso, they are under the last time we have the latest from them from June, is under the 1% mark. You know, and we always compare it to ourselves. But we have the Deputy Minister of Finance,
sanctions on
Dr. Adam Amin Mohammed, or Mohammed Adam, Anta Mohammed.
Minister of State.
Adam, Minister of State in charge of Finance. Okay. So
When
he'll be here.
Comes to the West,
He'll be here to get. Let me just also acknowledge a couple of our friends. Seth Adai, you say you see no point made by the prof, but he's making a lot of sense. Evans Ibn Samba says, Roland, does this Kwadaso member of parliament and professor go to church? Can't he just be truthful for once?
He stopped going to church a long time.